Hello, and welcome to the Eighth Man's annual breakdown of the US Quidditch Cup pools and flights. I'm Nick Jablonski, coach of Tufts and player with QCB, here with Ethan Warren, coach and player for University of Rochester, Miguel Esparza, player for THC Heat and the coach of UTSA, and Arden Lowe, player for Cal. We're going to start with the club team pools, because we feel that we'll move through them quickly and be able to get to the college flights to break those down for you. Starting with Pool A, we have Texas Cavalry, Terminus Atlanta, the Rain City Raptors, Rochester Hailstorm, the Rogues, and DCQC. So guys, who do we think wins this pool?
I think it's Cav, and I don't think it's particularly close.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that.
Yeah, agree.
Cav got a pretty lucky draw. I think Terminus, like if they can keep them in range, they have a good chance, but that's a big if.
Yeah. But I mean, Terminus did pick up Mike Pascatoy, so they do have a national Smith winning title pulling seeker on their team now. And they do have Jacob Parker this year, who just recently was announced to Team USA.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's interesting. Who do we think moves on?
Arden, do you want to go first on this?
Yeah, I think so. Just as a not disclaimer, but after watching the Rain City Raptors at the USQ West Regional, since there was a Super Regional, they impressed. I believe they finished runner-up to the Gambits. They had solid passing, but I think Cavalry, Terminus, and Rochester. I think you might be able to provide more insight into who the Hailstorms bring, Ethan. But if they're what their roster was at the beginning of the year, I think they'll easily move on.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think Cavalry and Terminus definitely go on. I think Hailstorm goes on off the strength of John Jackson. I don't think he'll let them not go on to day two. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to hop on with Ethan. I got to put my money on Hailstorm to advance.
I think this really depends on who gets that nice day one, because I think any of those four teams are going to have tough matchups against each other. So if you end up with a tough matchup for your day 2-1 game, like your one pool play game, that might decide who moves on. Right? So if we see Rain City Raptors and Hailstorm is the game for day 2 morning game, like last year with QCB and Lake Erie Elite, that was a game that determined if QCB did or didn't move on.
You're already making excuses for last year's Nationals. I see how it is.
Rough look. Do we think there's any dark horses, or do we think that other than Rain City and Rochester flipping, this pool plays out as expected?
Yeah, I don't expect Rogues to make any noise. Neither do I expect DCQC.
Yeah.
I think they'll both probably lose all of their games, except the ones against each other out of range. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay. So we'll move on to Pool B then. In Pool B, we have my team, Quidditch Club Boston, facing the Bosnian Bear Sharks, Lone Star QC, Carnage Quidditch, Vipers Quidditch, Silicon Valley Vipers, and the Fighting Farmers of America. All right.
So I think we're all in agreement that this is the pool of death. I think it's pretty obvious which three are coming out, but the fact that all three of these teams have to play each other is going to be rough.
On day one, too,
Yeah. That's brutal. Nick, since you're the expert on one of these teams, do you want to give your analysis first?
So I think that in this case, I agree with you that any of the top three could flip at any moment. I really do think this is going to come down to that QCB Bosnia game. We've seen Lone Star be taken care of by the Cavalries and the Heats of the world pretty confidently throughout the year. I don't know if they've recruited anyone or brought anyone out of retirement for this. But if that's not the case, then I see those games being tough for the top two teams, but they're still going to win, I think. I think this really comes down to that Northeast Regional Championship day 2 game that was played indoors where we see that they are just going to hang around and whoever catches the snitch. Carnage is a scary team, I think. Tevin Foster is a phenomenal seeker and has constantly bailed teams out in snitch range games. So I feel like that could cause some chaos in this pool. But I really do think that it's those top 3 teams. I don't think Lone Star is going to not move on to bracket in their home state.
Okay. Miguel, since you probably know Lone Star better than all of us, do you want to give some insight?
Yeah, they're a bunch of athletes, man. From top to bottom, they're a bunch of athletes. If they show up, they're gonna play. I know, going into the draw today, we didn't want to get Lone Star in our pool for an obvious reason. I could very easily see Lone Star winning the group. I could very easily see them coming in third. It's just kind of which Lone Star shows up. Are they there to have a fun time? Are they there to compete? They got the athletes, they got the pieces for it. Just kind of, are they going to take it serious or not? So,
yeah. Miguel, I don't know if you have any insight, but like watching some film, I think Gary Taylor put out of McCracken's like first game with Lone Star, he like kept stepping out of bounds.
Yeah,
because he just didn't know the new rules. And like their beaters did look pretty overmatched. I mean, like all the chasing talent was there, but I don't know if their beaters will hold anywhere close to QCB or like Max or Mario.
Yeah, I mean the 2 times that I've really watched LSQC play, I just know the guys on the sideline. They're out there having a fun time. That it's not that competitive spirit that they are going to come out with at nationals. So I mean, LSQC does this every year. They kind of play around half the year. They go into nationals, they show up, and they perform. So if they do that again, I definitely don't want to play them. But we'll see. We'll see what LSQC team shows up.
Yeah, I think the resounding consensus is that Lone Star has like one of, if not the like best chaser lineup like in Quidditch. It's definitely the most athletic chaser lineup in Quidditch.
Yep.
They have like athletes all across that roster, but I think the weak side for them is definitely the beater game, and I think their game against Bosnia is going to be really interesting because Bosnia definitely has way more beater talent, but if Bosnia can't play good chaser defense, which has been a bit of a problem for them this year, then I think Lone Star might take that match. So we'll see.
All I know is I wasn't thrilled to see this pool be drawn for a myriad of reasons. All right. So we have the top 3 teams moving on out of this group. Okay. Moving on to Pool C, we have the Warriors out of New York. We have Boom Train. We have the Bay Area Breakers. We have Lost Boys, Philadelphia Freedom, and the Atlantic Dragons. Guys, who wins?
I got to go with Boom. I think the Warriors can play with them. I think Boom Train's going to do enough stuff differently that it's going to just kind of cause havoc for them in that game. And I think that'll be the differentiating game in that group.
Yeah, I think Boom Train as well. I think they have mismatches on the beater game. I think they work together better than Warriors do. It's like throughout the years, I feel like Warriors haven't used their talent to the best of their abilities, and we'll see if they can do better this year. But I also think this matchup is going to be really interesting for the fact about the beater matchup. Like you've got Tyler Walker on one side, and you have what's his name, the Boom Train beater.
You got Matt Brown, you got Tad, you got a bunch of them.
Not the one.
Jeremy Hoffman.
Jeremy Hoffman, yeah. Jeremy Hoffman on the other side, right? And they played together for so many years, and I think that matchup's going to be really interesting because I was on Jeremy Hoffman's podcast earlier this year, and he thinks that he's like a lot better than Tyler, and so I think they're gonna have some fire going into that game, and that's gonna be a really really cool matchup to see.
Miguel, were you able to watch the Boom Train Cavalry like pool play game at Heroes Villains, the one where Boom won?
Yeah.
What would you take away from that game?
Cav just didn't play Cav ball. I personally think that Cav was trying to just get people reps, get used to the system, bringing people in. I would have done the same thing as a coach, but it definitely wasn't Cav playing the way Cav is going to play at Nationals.
I think it's also interesting to look at who comes out in the third spot between the Breakers and the Lost Boys.
Mhm.
I think I don't know if I think the Breakers have the advantage on the season series, but the Lost Boys look like a little better than what everyone thought they would at regionals, and they could not like I don't think they would upset anyone, but like they could give teams a tougher game than they think. Like I don't think that they're still like great or anything, but it could be like a sneaky hard game for a top team.
So I think we're all in agreement that Warriors and Boom Train both come out of this group. I think that third team coming out is going to be really interesting. So I think that might just come down to whoever wins from like Bay Area versus Lost Boys. Who do you think would win that game, Arden?
Personally, Bay Area Breakers like pretty easily. I know they play like a really slow pace, just like the Scroots. It's pretty much the same team plus Duran. But I watched their game against the Gambits at regionals, and they were, I think, in the lead for most of the game until like Margot just pulled like a second in. So I mean, they can slow down the pace to just like a crawl, but I think they could take it out of range against Lost Boys, and they have enough beating depth. They have a pretty like deep beater line that can give problems, but they don't have nearly any qualified talent to like capitalize on it. So, but I think they'll definitely be the third team to come out of the pool.
I think the Lost Boys are going to come out, honestly.
Okay.
I mean, every year we write off the Lost Boys as a team, and they make a run. I'm not saying that they're going to make the Final Four run that they made last year, but I think they make a bracket.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. The Lost Boys just don't have any quaffle talent. I don't know. They have like okay beaters, but like if Fernandez just has the ball carry all the time and then he has to go seek, there's really like nobody left that can kind of ball handle for them. And then at least the Breakers have like one or two like decent options.
I mean, if there's a group to make it out in with those kind of limitations, it's this group.
Yeah, fair.
I think. But I mean, I agree with you. It comes down to that game. Whoever wins that game is moving on. All right, so moving on to Pool D, the final pool, we have Texas Hill Country Heat, the LA Gambits, THC Frost, not THC Frost, TC Frost, my mistake, the Long Beach Funky Quaffles, Southern Storm, and the Houston Cosmos. Guys, who wins?
I think Heat wins this pretty cleanly. Or a better answer is whoever wins this is the team that doesn't lose to Funky Quaffles. Because Funky Quaffle is bound for one upset in their pool, no matter who it is. So whoever doesn't lose to Funky Quaffles is winning this pool.
Yeah. I mean, I know Funky Quaffles in Twin Cities played last year at Nationals, and Funky Quaffle, like, I think they beat them out of range. But they did lose a couple key pieces. They lost Michael Aguilera, who's like a good utility weapon, and Andrew Berger, who I think was their best player. So those two are some critical losses at critical positions. So I don't know if they're kind of like primed for like a big upset again like this year. Yeah, Miguel, what do you think about the pool for THC?
I mean, we got to go through Tony again. That's never easy. He's a phenomenal team. I mean, just Tony's an amazing athlete. LA's coming out for sure. And then, Funky Quaffles, they were in range with us for, I don't know, 10, 12 minutes. It's just kind of one of those weird teams. When you play teams like that, you have a different challenge of winning out of range on teams that you should just destroy. And it's hard. They're competitors. They're going to come and fight hard. And I can see them upsetting somebody and sneaking in for that third bid. Or for that third
I think Funky Quaffles plays every game in range because of just how slow they play. And this is something we were talking about like before the live stream started. But it's I know people have said that it's really frustrating playing against them because of that, and it's really hard to put them out of range.
What do we think about like out of the all the pot? I don't know. There's that 6 teams. Houston Cosmos. I don't know though. Like I feel like they could beat Storm, but like I feel like that would just be an annoying team to play against after watching just some of their film with Teddy. They're the Peevlers, right?
Yeah, I mean, Cosmos, they're a well coached team. They're physical. They're gonna make you uncomfortable. And some teams they handle that better than other teams. And that six pot, 5 pot pool, that Houston will make that game uncomfortable. I could see them coming in fourth in that pool.
Okay.
They get into people's heads. So
I think this is the best pool for. I wouldn't say the best pool, but one of the better draws they could have gotten. There's no Lone Star, there's no Rochester that they can't beat. I don't know. I like what I saw in film from them. I think I don't know if they'll necessarily pull an upset, but I could see them having close games with Southern Storm, Funky Quaffles, and Twin Cities.
Yeah, I mean, if they keep their heads, they don't get careless cards. I mean, Peeler got a card, snitch on pitch on day 2 or day 1 in Nationals. That killed that game. They can keep their heads. I think they get an upset here. They definitely win a game or 2 at Nationals.
Okay. So I think we're all in consensus that THC and THC Heat and LA Galaxy, LA Gambits, move on. Who do we think for our third team?
Funky Quaffles, man. Just playing against a slow team, it's hard. If you're just an athletic team, it's hard. I got to give the edge to Funky Quaffles.
Okay.
Nick?
I think Funky Quaffles has some real advantage. They were us losing on a snitch grab to Lake Erie Elite last year from making bracket last year. And I think that they have that ability to slow the game down to a point. And I don't think Twin Cities is a group that necessarily is going to outpace them or outmatch them at each level. So I think that Funky Quaffles has a chance to move on, but I think Frost. I think they've been sitting in that kind of middle ground of we're just barely not good enough to make bracket, that this is the year they make the push.
Okay. From what I've heard, they're a lot more disciplined this year, and just kind of they recruited some more athletes. I don't know if you guys know anything about that. Yeah, but for personally, I think Funky Quaffles takes the third spot. Just if solid beating, that could help just spring an upset.
Okay. So I'm gonna go on a limb here, and my thing with Funky Quaffles is that I think they're as likely to beat LA Gambits as they are to lose to Southern Storm, just because of the way they play, and that kind of worries me in their pool. So I'm gonna go on a limb here and take the 6th seed. I'm gonna take Houston Cosmos for that third spot, just because I have faith. I didn't really like how they played at regionals, but I have faith that they'll fix some of those mistakes because, as Miguel said, they're really well coached. They have a lot of talent. I think they have, out of the 5 and 6 seeds, they probably have the most talent on their roster. So I think that they can do something here and get that third spot.
Yeah, I don't hate that. I don't hate that take. I mean, they do have a lot of old Texas State who made the deep runs at USQ Cups 7 and 8 on their team. And they have a lot of young talent and a lot of people who've played with them through League City Legends and various MLQ teams. So I think if they can put it together, they could hang around with it.
Okay.
So with the bracket being preset, and that we don't know the winner of which pool is playing the winner of a 2 or 3 game from which other pool. But with that, do we think we'll see some gamesmanship and teams trying to determine their seeds to avoid different sides of the bracket? Like that pool B, where there's the Lone Star, QCB, Bosnia. Do we think we might see some of those teams just saying, okay, this 2 or 3 gets us on the side away from the Heat and Cavalry side of the bracket? Or are we going to see just people trying to play and win for that 1 seed?
I think it's going to be more just people resting their players and not really pushing games too far out of range to get the number 1 seed or something like that. Because I feel like we see a lot of times in the club side that even really really good teams when they're playing bad teams, they'll win by 60 or 70, but not by huge margins that you would expect them to win by. So I'm not sure if we'll actually see much of that gamesmanship.
Yeah, I agree. But also, I mean, if that ends up with a pool A and D on the same side of the bracket, um, I don't know. I think that all the tier two teams, like there's none like a bad tier pot two team. Sorry. I don't think there's like a bad pot two team that you like want to necessarily draw. I mean, I think Bosnia's the toughest, so I think people would just try to straight up play for the one seed, or just like, yeah. I don't think there'll be too much gamesmanship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly touch on that, considering it is a new thing for USQ Cup.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have anything else they want to bring up about the club side of this, or shall we move on to the colleges?
I think we're good to move on to colleges.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll start with Flight A, and just to recap who's in this flight and the first round matchups, we have the University of Miami, Ohio Quidditch versus USF, Southern Florida. For the 2 versus 15, we have NYU versus University of Northern Colorado. For 3 versus 14, we have University of Rochester versus Lock Haven. For 4, we have Cal versus the Illinois State Firebirds. For 5v12, we have Texas A&M versus Harvard. For the 6 versus 11, we have Minnesota versus Richmond. For the 7 versus 10, we have JMU versus BGSU. And for the 8 versus 9, we have Anteater versus Virginia Tech. This is the first set, I think, that has 2 of our hosts potentially facing off after the first round.
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, who do we think wins? Who gets that 4-0 spot?
I think you two should handle this before Arden and I get into it.
So I'll start. I think that both Rochester and Cal, and I guess A&M, in this case, got a gift in avoiding the Kansases and the Marylands and the UT of the college game.
Mm-hmm.
I think NYU is a tough team. I think that's not a matchup anyone wants to see, but I don't think it equates to a Kansas or UT.
What are we thinking about Miami Quidditch?
I haven't seen a lot of them this year, but judging on the past, I know that they tend to slow the game down and like to keep teams in range that way.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest upset that I know that they've sprung was Tufts at USQ Cup 9
mm-hmm.
In pool play in their first game, and I believe that they probably will win against Southern Florida. I think
mm-hmm.
that's comfortable. But I could see them being in the 4 or 5 coming out of this flight.
Yeah, I know for me, I think Miami, I believe, won the Great Lakes Regional, right? All the way back in like October. And I think they just lost 1 game along the way to Bowling Green,
mm-hmm.
I think. So for them, I think they're comprised of a ton of like athletic, full of players. Their keeper, like Hayden, really, really big, really strong. But I'm not sure about the beater support that they have.
Mm-hmm.
I think Rochester is a pretty bad matchup for that, with Tim and Steven. So I think overall this is a solid pool. Like, I don't think it was it's definitely not the pool of death. It's definitely not the easiest pool. I think it's just like an okay pool.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
okay. Miguel,
pretty fair across
what are your
the board.
thoughts on this?
So I got A&M topping the flight. If they can do one thing,
yikes!
The players have to keep their heads. If they can play smart, they don't get useless cards. They stay composed. I think they're going to outplay anybody in their flight. But all season long, it's been a challenge for A&M. They get in there, they're in a game, and they take themselves out mentally, and they check out. But yeah, they got the firepower, they got the beaters, they got the physicality. They can make a run. It's if the coach can manage that, if they can manage their mentality or not. So I want to say that they can and they will. So I'm going to go with them top, and then Rochester, and then Cal in that order. But they can play with the best of them. They've played with us, so I got to give them the nod.
Okay. So I think this is a pretty interesting flight. Miami, I don't know if we're giving enough credit to. The only in-range games they played were the 2 games against Central Michigan, which they won both of them, and their loss to Bowling Green. And they also blew out Michigan a bunch of times when they played them. And Michigan is a pretty highly seeded team, so I think that that bodes well for them. So I think they might surprise. I think the big thing for them is they haven't played like very, very talented teams yet this year, and so we'll see how they do against that. NYU is a tough matchup for anyone, as Nick said. They're a really, really strong team just overall. I think their one weakness is female chaser, now that Molly Potter isn't on their team anymore, but still a very, very good team. So I have us coming out of this flight first, and I don't know how to say that without sounding biased, but I think we match up very well against NYU because we played them multiple times. I think, as Miguel said, Texas A&M has a lot of talent, but they do get very frustrated, and I think we tend to frustrate teams a lot, and I know NYU does as well. I think this is going to come down between Cal and U of R, and I think it's going to be an in-range game. So we'll see what happens there, but I have us coming out of that.
So do we see any matchups? What matchups out of this flight do we want to see? Like, what do we of these first 8? What game are you going to watch during this time slot? And then what matchups do we want to see for just strictly like later in the day?
So I want to see NYU Cal. I think that matchup's really interesting just because of their style of play. NYU plays at like a frenetic pace. They are like high gear all the time, and it's because of their beater, Jeff Ebner, who just like he's insane. Like that's how he plays. And I've said this before on the Aikman, but he'll single-handedly win you a game or single-handedly lose you a game. And most of the time he's winning them games, right? So depending on which Jeff shows up against Cal, I think that'll be a really cool matchup.
I think a game I would look forward to, definitely, I think if we're looking just kind of away from the top teams, could be Anteater. Like even against A&M. Is that Minnesota in the 6?
Minnesota in the 6.
Yeah, I think that definitely be. I don't know. That's not a first round matchup, but I think that could definitely be something interesting for Anteater. They have a solid They have a solid first beating line and a couple athletic chasers that they slow the game down a ton. I think they could give problems to some people, and I don't know if necessarily spring an upset, but again, like keep things in range, and then they have 2 really solid seekers that could close out a game. So I could see Anteater spring an upset. Yeah, but I think it'll come down to Cal or U of R.
Okay. So sorry to take over the mic again, but I think another matchup I'm interested in is that 10 seed Bowling Green.
That 10 seed is Bowling Green.
Yeah, so Bowling Green Miami again. I think that would be cool to see if Miami could avenge that loss. So yeah.
The one I'm interested in is I'm curious to see what Harvard does throughout this.
Ethan Sturm.
Yeah.
I mean, Ethan's a great coach. It's that simple. Like when you have a great coach and you have a beater the caliber of Michael Chenevey, who I think may straight up be the 1B, 1B2 in this for beaters in this flight, with Steve, obviously I think being the top one. But I think that I'm curious to see how many teams can work around that aspect of them, because Harvard kept RPI in range just constantly throughout this year. They did it at regionals when RPI was clearly trying to win and very focused on performing at their best. And I think with that, and if they get a couple lucky pulls, or they just keep teams in range and tire them out, that could make for some really interesting matches.
Yeah.
Miguel, do you have any thoughts?
I'd like to see A&M and Cal. I think that'd be a good matchup. There's really nothing in that opening morning or the morning games that really excite me, but A&M Cal I feel like be good. Midday, both on 2-0 records, kind of set the pace for the rest of the day for them. I think that'd be a good matchup.
Yeah. No, I'm looking forward to it. I think it's a more balanced flight than I think all the other flights are. One through six seeds, like you have a solid 10, you have a solid 8 seed. I think overall it's a pretty balanced flight. There's no like huge glaring weaknesses or like huge glaring strengths.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So if we were gonna pick our teams to make it out of this flight, who do we got?
How many make it out?
I think it's 6, right?
It's a
Bracket?
11,
How much is it to make it out?
11 40, 14.
Yeah.
Oh, 11 make it
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
Never mind.
Yeah. So what 5 do we think don't?
Well, yeah, let's go with that.
Mm. Do you want to go ahead, Ethan?
Yeah. So that 15 seed, what team is that again?
That's University of Northern Colorado.
There it is.
Yeah,
I don't think University of Northern Colorado is making it out. Yeah, it's a rough one for them. I don't think USF is making it out. I think JMU has some talent. I think Minnesota made it pretty far in the bracket last year, and they've got some talent on their team. Oh, go ahead.
I think BGSU is the most likely of the top 11 to not make it out of this group. I think within that, I could see a Harvard, right, staying in range with them and sneaking into that kind of game there. I could see Southern Illinois Firebirds staying in range with them. That's the team that's known for doing that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And making them. So I believe last year they were playing. They played Tulane as their last game of the day, BGSU, to not go 0-4. So I could see that happens.
Okay. Yeah, and I don't think Firebirds are going to make it out. So.
Yeah.
All right. Do we want to move on to Flight B or?
Yeah.
Okay. Flight B for the 1 versus 14 game, we have Kansas versus Bobcat Quidditch. 2 versus 13 is Mizzou versus Appalachian. 3 versus 12 is Central Michigan versus Illinois University. 4 versus 11 is Utah State versus Macaulay. 5 versus 10 is UCLA versus RIT. The 6 versus 9 is UCF versus Ball State. And the 7 versus 8 is Creighton versus Austin Quidditch, which is UT's B team.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Who wins?
I think Kansas, hands down, sweeps through this.
Kansas, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen much of Mizzou this year, but playing Kansas, really solid top to bottom, and they're probably the best college seeker in Riley Andrews. Yeah, so if anything's enraged. Yeah, I don't know. Their beating is really, really good too. In addition to like all the chasing stuff you hear from their team, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Kansas walks away with this flight.
Yep.
No questions.
Yeah.
I think what's more interesting is this is one of the few flights where we have really interesting 4v11 and 5v10 games. I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is the one where we'll see really, really potential to have teams make it out in a really weird way.
Yeah. What's also really interesting about this flight, and John Quattlebaum posted this, is that there are 14 teams in this flight, and 4 of them are Midwest teams. So I think that's pretty wild that you're going to see a lot of matchups with teams that are familiar with each other. And obviously familiarity breeds competition. So we'll see if we get a lot of in-range games because of that.
Something interesting is that UCLA and RIT, this is their 3rd year in a row playing at nationals. So I think that could. I know UCLA has come out handily on top, and I think it will be the same thing again. Yeah, cool note.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty interested in that 5v10 game. I think RIT's a pretty good team. I think UCLA is definitely a much better team, but I think it leaves some room for an interesting first game, which we don't get to see a lot of.
Yeah. UCF, Ball State, I think could be interesting too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think the interesting thing about this pool is Utah State, UCLA, Mizzou could all, and CMU, right?
Mm-hmm.
The three, that could be like a pretty big like bloodbath for who gets second. Just like, after you win one game in Swiss, and you, like, let's say UCLA wins one, they have to play CMU. They do win that, they have to go play like a Mizzou, and then Mizzou has to go play like a Utah State. It's just not fun. So I think this flight has a potential to kind of wear out whatever like the 2 or 3 team comes out behind
So I
Kansas.
guess an interesting question is, who do we think gets second in this flight? If we're all on board with Kansas getting first,
I think Mizzou does. Like, yeah, I think Mizzou. Just kind of looking at some of the results this year, obviously they know Kansas very well, so like they could get a win there. But I think every other team, CMU, Utah State, and UCLA all has a glaring weakness, and I don't think Mizzou does.
So I'm really not that high on Mizzou. I don't really think they're that good. I think they're living off of the hype of beating a Kansas team that was without their top 4 players, like 3 of which have a chance to be on like the U.S. standing team, which like they're a very top heavy team. And
Who are they
so
missing?
like they were missing Rachel, Riley, McMorris, and Brendan Tabor, I believe. So like those are the top 4 players. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure all 4 of them are gone for that tournament. So like I don't think you can stake much in that win. And if I look at like some of their other results, like they got destroyed by Boom Train, who's a very good team, but they lost to like TCQC. They trying to see other stuff. They just haven't had very many impressive games. I don't think they've had an impressive win this year, because I don't really count that Kansas win as an impressive win. So
Mizzou didn't travel to Alamo Cup this year, correct?
I don't believe so. Yeah.
Okay. That's where we saw a lot of the impressive Mizzou games of last year were in those games against teams at Alamo Cup. So, this could just be a case of not traveling to play the teams that can match up. But I do think this is one of the more interesting 2 through 5 groups.
Yeah. I think I'd probably give it to Utah State, just because I think they have the best ball handler. I think it's between UCLA and Utah State for that one, outside of the one, obviously. So I think Utah State will get that second place in this flight. I think it's going to be a really close game again between Utah State and I think it's going to be a close game between Utah State and UCLA. I don't think it was particularly close at regionals, was it? Didn't Utah State kind of blow them out?
UCLA starting keeper was injured, like Jonathan. So once he's healthy, I think that'll even out. But I think it's tricky because Utah State, I think, has the best seeker in like West College and Kellen Hoover. And they have solid like a solid just rotation of really good male beaters that they can sub on for stitch on pitch. On the other side, UCLA could push it out of range if they have Liz in there seeking. And then they have Ryan Harris and Justin Van Ligten beating. And then Jonathan healthy, and Utah State isn't particularly great at stopping the drive or like finishing the drive against physical teams. I think if Jonathan can, that full strength, can lay some hits and finish at the hoop, they could pull the game out of range. So, so I think it's pretty much on that game. It's pretty much how well Jonathan does, because I think the beater matchups will be pretty even.
I think going back to an interesting thing is that we have 2 Team USA players in this flight, in Rachel Heald and Elizabeth Eng, both of which could have these huge impacts. And given that Ethan and I talked about the 2 of them, as well as Bailey Fields, I think it's interesting that we might get to see them fight it out.
Yeah, I really hope UCLA uses Elizabeth really well, because I felt like at regionals they didn't. So if their game plan centers more around her, I think they have a really good shot to play second in this flight. But if they don't, I don't think they'll keep up with Utah State.
So I know part of that is Jonathan, because Ryan Harris, who was their starting keeper, is more of a pass heavy, really good at looking and including a lot of the options. And that's where Elizabeth really flourished. But this year he is forced to transition to beater. And Jonathan's like still working on his passing. He's still a sophomore. I'm sure that's something they're working on in practice. So I think they'll look a lot better than they did at Western. Yeah.
Okay.
And they have but they have a lot of people who like still are getting playing time and still learn the game, especially on the beater end. So that's just like some growing pains. Yeah.
Did anyone else have anything?
So who do we think doesn't move on? The bottom 3 teams in this situation.
I'm gonna go with that A's Appalachian State, right?
Correct.
I'm gonna go with them. I'm gonna go with Illinois, and who's that 14 again?
Bobcat Quidditch.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Bobcat.
Yeah.
Any objections to that?
No. I haven't seen Bobcat Quidditch this year, but I don't know, Miguel, if you can provide anything. Just like B team players, yeah.
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 I mean, yeah. I think their big goal is probably going to be to get out and win a game at some point. So, but they're not going to challenge at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I think this is also a fight where we have like very good 11 and 10. Well, not very good, but like decent 11 and 10 like seed teams. So I think it leaves much less room for the bad teams or the like not as competitive teams to like make it to day 2.
I mean, Bobcat, Texas State fans travel too, and it's a half hour from where they are. And we do know that Texas State has a huge club supporting it rather than just the teams. So who knows? I mean, you get down to the end of the day, they've won a game, they're 1-2, and they're fighting for that last spot. They could sneak in.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else we want to cover on this flight? Or do we move on?
No, I think this will be a fun flight to watch.
Yeah. All right. So with Flight C, we have University of Maryland versus the University of Iowa. We have UT versus Brandeis. Ohio University versus Utah Raptors. Tufts University versus Duke. Grand Valley versus FGCU Quidditch. University of Florida versus Middlebury. Baylor versus ASU. And UTSA versus SIUE. Guys, who wins?
Texas.
Yeah, I would probably say UT.
I think Texas, the only thing holding them back is like themselves, and like I don't know if they're just trying to get more playing time or whatever. But in our game against them at Heroes Villains, they were totally out of range. They're blowing us out, and then they just put all their seekers on the snitch. And then it was just let us kind of climb back into range. So I don't know if that was like on purpose or whatever, but I think Texas runs away with this pool, and they have enough depth to last them, like even if someone like does go down. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think their only close game will be against Maryland.
Yeah.
But I think Texas has the beaters to like keep Maryland at bay. I think, I don't think they'll have a problem there.
Yeah, the Texas's beaters are going to roll all over Maryland.
Yeah. I think Maryland's keeper is really underrated. Dale Farnan is like a very, very strong player. So I think that might be interesting to see how he matches up against Texas's keeper. But I guess we'll see how that works. I think Texas wins this one pretty cleanly, though.
I think Texas wins this one, but I don't think it's as clean as we think it is. I think Maryland is their only strong competition
definitely
in here. I mean, I'd love to say Tufts would give UT a game, but I'm not sure we're at that level yet. Prove me wrong, team. But I think that UMD has shown in the past that they can hang with just about anyone, no matter what. And they have constantly shown up strong at nationals and made a further push than we expect them to. And if they don't meet until the 3-0 game, and it's later in the day and the lights are on and everything like that, then I think that we've seen crazier things happen in Swiss setups.
Who do you guys think takes third in this flight? I think UTSA could take third.
Yeah. I definitely think UTSA is the favorite to take third in this flight.
Miguel, do you want to?
They got to show up, man. Like, they're just a smaller team. If they show up, no injuries, yeah, they'll take third. They might be able to play in games, sneak in the second, but they got to show up. So we'll see what they do.
Yeah. I think fourth, actually, I'm going to go all the way to the 11th seed for fourth. I think Middlebury takes fourth in this flight. Middlebury's their keeper is really, really, really good at Quidditch. Like Ian Scorum, yeah, he is like an incredible talent. Like I got to watch him play this year for really the first time. We played against them last year, but they like weren't really trying that hard. And they were just kind of having fun. And he's like carried that team on his back for a nationals berth. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I saw Middlebury play 3 weeks ago. And even since regionals, they've recruited some very athletic players. They're moving the ball a lot more intelligently. And they had comfortably put BU out of range before some inclement weather allowed BU to come back in range. They were moving the ball well. They were playing sharp. I don't know if they necessarily take the 4 seed in this case, unless you're having Tufts move up to the 3 seed. But I do think Tufts can hang in that 3-4 range. But I do agree with you that I think Middlebury makes that leap.
Yeah. I think like 3, 4, and 5 are all kind of like a mix with, you've got Ohio, you've got Tufts, you've got Middlebury, and you've got UTSA, who I think are the ones going to be competing for that. So I think it's kind of a coin flip for any of the teams. I would say UTSA has the advantage, but I don't know. Tufts and Middlebury have strong keepers, strong ball handlers. So we'll see how they perform. And yeah,
I think this one really depends on when you see who you see. Like if Tufts say sees a UT or a Maryland right away in their 1-0 game or their whatever, assuming they go 1-0, I hope, that they get to that 2-1, 3-1 state through the starting at 1-1 age. They have a really good shot at jumping to that 3 seed from that. But say they face like a Baylor or an ASU or a Middlebury in that 1-0 seed and go to 2-0 and have to get to it that way, you could see more games that would affect their tiebreakers. And that goes for any of the 3, the Ohio, Tufts, UTSA, and Middlebury, depending on how they get there. I think will really affect their tiebreakers.
Okay.
Anything else we want to say about Flight C?
I think ASU, we play them at regionals. We know them pretty well. They're a really just like big physical team as they are usually. And I think they'll move on to day 2, but I think they could. They have a really smart beater in Imani Burton. Solid, and they have like some solid rookie beaters behind him who are like still developing. So I think they could contend for the 4 spot against like Grand Valley or Tufts, like teams that might not be used to like just playing like really, really big physical teams. No.
That's interesting because didn't ASU like have blowout losses this year to like Anteater? And
they didn't give a shit about that game out regional.
Okay.
Yeah. They're just resting everyone. So yeah, I know. I think they could make a bid for the 4th spot along with Middlebury.
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting flight. I think any of those teams in the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 8 spot could all just end up however.
Mm-hmm.
in that group.
Yeah, I think after 1 and 2, it's just a huge toss-up.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do we think any of the 12 through 15 or 12 through 16 are moving on?
I don't think so. I think the one with the biggest chance would be Utah.
No.
You don't think so at all?
No. They have one good player.
Yeah. I think, then probably not any of them.
Yeah.
Any matchups we want to see out of this group?
I want to see Middlebury versus Ohio. I think that'll be a good game.
Interesting.
Yeah. I want to see ASU Maryland.
Yeah.
Just because Maryland has those, we've talked about that their weakness is at beating in general. And if ASU hasn't developed any beaters past Ryan and Vicky, then they might have this. It might just be this big drag down physical game, which is always fun to watch, especially in the college game.
Ryan and Vicky graduate, I think.
So if that's the case, and they haven't developed, and then my point stands even more. If they haven't developed any beaters, then we could just have chaos. Which is always fun.
They have a solid top line beater of Amani, Burton, and Cassandra. That's about it.
Yeah, and I mean UMD also has a pretty solid top line, but when it comes to regulating their depth, they have troubles with that.
They have a really solid female beater, which allows them to play like female chaser, and they're really, really deep at chaser on their team. Like they've got a bunch of really athletic players. So I think that might be a boon for them against some of like the larger like Texas teams. So we'll see if their beaters can keep up though. I think UT is just a really bad matchup for them.
Yeah, I agree. I mean Maryland always comes to play, and they've proven us wrong before. So let's see what happens. Anything else we want to cover with this flight?
No.
All right. We'll move on to the last flight, Flight D. We have the University of Virginia versus the Silver Phoenix. We have University of Michigan versus Rutgers, RPI versus Texas Tech, Texas State versus Illinois Quid, Penn State versus Syracuse, Gamecock Quidditch versus Michigan State, and BU versus Florida State. Guys, who wins?
Texas State.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty clearly Texas State.
Yeah.
I just don't think any of the beaters in Flight D can keep up with them, and it's a beater game. And if their beaters are just going to run circles around RPI and Virginia, who are probably their two main competition, then I don't see them losing a game. I honestly don't see them playing a game in range.
Yeah, this is the best possible draw.
This is a great draw for them.
I think Texas State and then Virginia and RPI will decide the two, and then Michigan will be 4. Michigan, Penn State will be 4 or 5. Yeah, I think that this is a pretty clear-cut pool flight.
What about is that 11 is Texas Tech, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
What do we think about them?
Let's have Miguel speak to this.
They might sneak in and get like an 11th bid, but they don't have a big team. They'll win a game. They might be able to win a second game, and later into day one, maybe they sneak in and get that bid.
Because I think they went 2-2 last year at Nationals. I think they played us in our 4th game on day 1. Yeah.
Oh, and I forgot about this. Josh Mansell just pointed it out. So their big point chaser, ball carrier, Lucas Callan, he's out.
Oh, okay.
That is a big loss for them.
They'll still have Derek, but going into snitch on pitch, maybe Derek pulls in 30 seconds, but I think they're gonna get blown out.
Yeah, taking Derek Malone off the field will be like a big loss for them. Like if they need to have him seek, their quaffle game is going to suffer, and I don't know if they have the beaters to pull quickly.
That's an interesting matchup for RPI, though. I think honestly, I think RPI it's a very systematic team, and they They are very organized, as Ethan has seen. But I think that against a hard-hitting team like Texas Tech and a team that's going to come out and scrap, that could be a close range. And who knows? Maybe they do pull in 30 seconds and snatch a quick win off of that.
Yeah. So I think RPI is a very good team. I'm a lot higher on them than a lot of people are. But I think at some point they just need to like let the reins off their players and like let them run wild because they have some really, really athletic chasers. And I think if they just let them like hero ball sometimes, I think they could pull some upsets in this flight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Virginia probably gets the 2 here. I just think Virginia and RPI are like, I mean, like going up against Texas State, like that's a terrible matchup for them. I think this is like the worst matchup they could have drawn.
Mm-hmm.
Like if they wanted to win their flight. So yeah, not to say that Virginia or RPI are bad teams.
Yeah. What does Virginia look like this year? I know they only have. I only know Matt Cooper, but I think he graduated.
No, I think Matt Cooper is playing.
Cooper is still playing for them.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
he's in law school or business school, something. I think he's a grad student. So
Okay.
he's like an incredible seeker, right? And like also a good chaser. So that's a big boon for them. They have David Littleton, they have Brett Curtis at beater, and they have a couple other like talented players whose names I just can't remember right now. RPI has a really talented female chaser and a female beater who's like very good. But again, you're in a fight with Bailey Fields, so you're going to get outclassed. So
Yep.
it's just kind of a shame.
Virginia's passing is immaculate. They
Mhm.
have an incredible ability to move the ball. It was very well evidenced in the Oktoberfest finals, even in the mud and rain, that field was at that point. They were moving the ball very, very well, very sharply.
And I think they were without a decent number of their pieces in that
yes,
game.
but I think that may help them lock up a 2 seed in their ability to just move the ball so efficiently.
Yeah, I think that's why I'm really interested in this Virginia RPI matchup because of how systematic both teams are, right? Like we already talked about RPI's like systematicness. I just think that'll be like really interesting to see which chasers come out on top.
Mm-hmm. Do we know anything about Michigan?
I think they've coasted by playing not very good teams. Shout out to them for dodging us at the Challenge Invitational. I'm kind of bitter about that, but it's whatever. Yeah, I don't think they've really played anyone. So yeah.
Yeah, I think they were the easiest pot 2 team.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
I think one team that's kind of interesting is Syracuse because they lost their best player. And yeah, Josh Hintz, who now plays for Hailstorm. And he kept for them last year, and he's beating for them this year and was also like their best seeker. So he sort of did everything on their team. And they're coming in as a 10 seed, but like I think you could make the argument that they're like one of, if not the worst team in this fight because of like that huge loss. So if we're looking at like teams that don't make it out, I would say Syracuse is that 13 Silver Phoenix.
Yeah, I think Silver Phoenix has a real shot to make bracket.
Same.
Like we've always seen that they can move.
Sure.
Yeah,
For sure.
Really? You think Silver Phoenix makes
Yeah.
it? Oh.
Yeah.
I was gonna go Syracuse, Silver Phoenix, and whoever that 14 is.
Rutgers.
Yeah, definitely.
No, Silver Phoenix is great. I think they're a really, really solid B team. Every time I've seen them, and going back to the years when I played in the Southwest and played them pretty often, was that they understand what they are as a team and don't try to be something different. They really work on things that they can control, and they do them very, very well.
I think so. I haven't seen Silver Phoenix play in like 2 years, but last time I saw them play, one of the big things I noticed was like there were a lot of large personalities on that team. Like, and I think there were some attitude issues that I saw on that roster, and I think that like is an issue when you're trying to make like a run, and especially like when you're on the fringe with like making day two, and so if like tempers start to fly, which I'm not sure if this is the same issue that they're having, but it was definitely an issue a few years ago. So I think that might be something to look at.
I think I don't know how A&M recruited this year, but we watched them. We watched their long game against Sam Houston last year at Nationals, where they just dragged out, kind of were like down 40, 50, 60 the entire time. And they're the best B team in the nation, I'm pretty sure. So, I mean, I don't know about this year, but I think historically. And then last year I watched Michigan State. I think their rankings inflated. Same with Florida State playing the South. I don't think they're very good. So I think they have a real shot to make it out.
Yeah, I think if they make it in, they're going to bounce Michigan State.
Yep.
Do we have anything else to talk about for Flight D or flights in general?
No. How important do you guys think it's going to be to get in, finish your business, and pull a stitch and get out of the game? I know last year, right before we played Rochester, we played, I don't know, like a 2-hour game against somebody.
You played Minnesota.
And we were up by like 12, 13 points. We could just not get off the field. And that, it killed us. Game 3 of day 2 of Nationals. And we just, it killed us.
Yeah.
I think it could be the same thing again.
So I think that's definitely a big factor. And like speaking as to our run last year, like we had very quick games. And like I think some of the teams we played, like you talked about your team UTSA, and I know Kansas when we played them, they had just come off that overtime win against UCLA, right? That was a really long game too. And so I think it is really important. But I think that's more of a day 2 problem than a day 1 problem for this.
I think it really depends on the team. I think teams that are trying to secure a comfortable spot in the bracket that are in that middle of like 4 or 5 range are going to need to just catch and be done, right? Whereas I think Kansas can definitely, the Kansases, the UTs of the world can cycle in, the Texas States can cycle in their depth and just let them get the playing time and execute and just walk away if it's a long game.
So going over all the colleges now, what teams, there's some teams that probably can't win the championship. They just don't have the depths or whatever. They can cause a lot of havoc day 2 of Nationals or even day 1. Do you guys have any teams that come to mind? Who do you think they are? Where do you think they'll fall in terms of the final product of Nationals?
I think Utah State is a prime example. Super good top line, but they don't have too many people in their program, and they just don't have that many bodies that like you need for a deep run. But I think they could cause some havoc. If we kind of, Nick, can you go through the flights again, just like kind of browse through?
Yep.
If Utah State ends up facing like a Virginia, Maryland, could see them beating them, like a Mizzou, Miami, like a team that was like looking to make a deep run, and then like the Sweet 16 round, and they kind of get bounced by Utah State. I wouldn't be surprised to see that. Yeah, but I don't see them like winning the entire thing.
Yeah, no, like we were talking earlier, especially on the college side, it's really easy to rely on like 7, 8, 9, 10 players to win one game, right? You can't do that all tournament, but you could, do that against most teams.
Yeah,
you would play against if you have a solid line 1.
I think RIT probably falls into that of like you don't want to play them in bracket just because they could mess up your run kind of group there. I think you probably don't want to face a Middlebury kind of team as well.
That's all I got. So
I think, do we think that coaching is going to play a huge precedence in this? Like, do we think that like the Elite 8 teams, we're going to see 6 out of 8 of them have coaches this year? Because last year was the first start of the development of non-playing coaches really for college teams at a high rate. And I think this year it's just exploded, the number of non-playing college coaches. So do we think that's going to be the big deal this year?
Yeah, I don't want to differentiate coaching from non-coaches. I think the teams that in that Elite Eight, you're going to have teams there who have coaches or leadership that just manage the game and make that part of their game plan. They're not just going, hey, let's do it and let's play, right? But they know that, hey, we're going to do this up till minute 17. We're going to do this at minute 23. And they've already had those scenarios talked to with your players. It's a long game, right? You get into 18 minutes, 25 minutes, 30 minutes. You need to be playing differently, especially if you're you're out of range, right? I didn't manage the game properly against UTSA when we were up by 12, and that ended up hurting us later on in the tournament. So I've been seeing teams make that a priority at tournaments, at least in the Southwest. I'm sure they're doing it elsewhere as well. So.
Just curious, what teams kind of like in the top 5-6 seeds do have non-playing coaches? Really, all I can name is like Texas.
Yeah, I mean, I think Texas does.
I don't know if that many other colleges do.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Like, I don't know if I count. I'll probably play some games, but yeah.
Texas A&M has a non-playing coach.
Mm-hmm.
They do. Texas State, I don't know if Jackson is reprising his role from last year or not. Miguel could probably speak to that more efficiently.
Yeah, I haven't talked to him about it. I know he doesn't want to stay in the sun a lot, so I'm going to and he doesn't want to step on Ryan's toes, so I'm going to say Jackson's probably not going to be on the sideline at the game. So.
Yeah.
I think RPI has Mario, non-playing coach.
RPI.
So.
RET has Daniel Gagne.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's just more of a case in the Northeast. I know that in Boston there's plenty of coaches and all throughout the Northeast, so that might be the case up here. Okay, just thought it's something I thought I'd bring up.
For sure.
Any other closing points before we close it off?
No, I think that's it.
Who do you guys think wins? Or like, what's your Final Four?
Final Four.
Spirit of March Madness.
I think Final Four is really hard to do just because we don't know what the draws are going to be, like day 2.
Right now, Ethan, what do you have?
Oh, God. I have UT, Kansas, Texas State, and U of R. I have the exact same Final Fours last year.
Miguel?
So I got UT and Kansas as locks for me.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I feel like that Cal's, the Mizzou, the Texas States, I really haven't seen anybody differentiate enough to know that, hey, they're going to get here. I'd like to see Texas State make it in there. I'd like to see U of R make it in there. But I think that, that 3 to 6 is really wide open to who grabs those 2 extra spots.
Arden, you got anyone?
I agree with Ethan, except sub U of R for Cal.
that flight has a huge impact. That's not understating it.
I think for me, my 3 locks are UT, Texas State, and Kansas are my 3 locks, depending on how the draw ends up. But I think that 4th spot is open to anyone.
Mm-hmm. I think it's probably going to be, just off the top of my head, let's say UT, Kansas, Cal, and RPI. Let's say that right now. I think RPI comes out with some crazy stuff that people haven't seen. They've thrown all sorts of new things at us all year. And I think that teams are going to fail to adjust to it. And like you said, if they let those athletes play, like, who knows what happens.
All right. Well, I think that's it from us.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you to all of you for watching. And if you stuck with us this long, thanks for listening to us ramble. And we keep an eye on the 8th Man for content being produced in the weeks leading up to Cup. All right. Have a good night. Take care.
Take care.
Later.